You are absolutely as worthy today as you ever have been. And none of those accomplishments or achievements are what make you who you are. If you're job searching right now, you're in the right place. Welcome to Land Your Next Job, the show that helps you move from ghosting and rejection to interviews and offers. I'm Erica Parker Price, a certified career coach with a background in tech who has spent nearly a decade helping professionals land roles at companies like Microsoft, Google, and mission-driven organizations. Each week, I share what's actually working in today's job market, from LinkedIn and networking to how AI is reshaping hiring. You'll get clear strategies and inspiration so you can run this marathon without burnout or guesswork. Follow the show and let's land your next job together. Hello and happy Monday. This is Erica Parker Price, and today I am going to be talking to you about identity. It's something we don't think about very often, and when we do think about it, sometimes honestly it makes our brains hurt. But the time that I see it coming up for people is when they're in between jobs or when a job has suddenly been pulled out from under them. And what happens is a realization that many of us associate our identity with our job, with our title, with our type of work. The first time I experienced this was the first time that I wasn't working as an adult, and it was intentional. I had chosen to leave Intel when my kids were 1 and 3 years old. I was 6 months away from a sabbatical, but it was also a time that I really needed to leave and be home with my kids. I was in a job where I was traveling about a third of the time, and that just was not sustainable with 2 young children at home. So I chose to leave. And the way that this showed up for me, it wasn't like I was laying in bed at night having an existential crisis thinking, who am I? But when I would meet people and people would ask that invariable question, what do you do? That's where it was showing up for me. And I noticed that a year later, my answer to that question was, I used to work at Intel. Used to. A year ago, I was not leading with what I had chosen to do, which was to stay at home with my kids. And it wasn't that I was ashamed or embarrassed of it. It's just that my identity was so closely tied to the company that I was having a hard time introducing myself without that anchor. And some of this actually varies by country. I know that some countries are more likely to associate themselves with their family or their culture or their religion or politics or any other number of different things. Those are all just different groups that people associate themselves with. In Japan, for example, company is very commonly the identity, the primary identity that you hold. But all of those things come into question when something like that changes, right? So when you are in the process of changing jobs and somebody says, what do you do? Is that something that makes you pause? How do you answer that question? And not just how do you answer it in real time in that moment, but what is your brain doing around your identity? And I think answering that question, it's really just the nudge to start to think about it. So we're going to take a deep dive on identity today, and I hope that it at least raises some questions for you, potentially brings up some exercises you can do to start to figure it out. And I don't know that we're going to get to an exact answer by the end of this, and that's okay. It's a big question, but I think it's worth discussing because I know it's something that people struggle with when they're in this time, when they're in this gap between jobs, between industries, professions, all of those different things. So to get started, let's look at the definition. So this comes out of Merriam-Webster. The first definition is the distinguishing character or personality of an individual. And I think it's interesting that that doesn't say anything to do with where you work, what you do, all of that. It's your distinguishing character or personality. Many of us have fallen pretty far away from that definition. So I decided I wanted to go a little bit deeper and see if I could find any other definitions around this. I found this in Psychology Today. It says identity encompasses the memories, experiences, relationships, and values that generates one's sense of self. This amalgamation creates a steady sense of who one is over time, even as new facets are developed and incorporated into their identity. And so what that tells me is it's really the sum of all the things that you have been through, who you are as a person, what you value, and what you have experienced and learned along the way. It is more than anything in that definition ever changing. I came into this recording today with my own sense as to what I think identity is. From a coaching perspective, I always teach people that thoughts are the one thing that you can control. But when we dig deeper on thoughts, you can get down to beliefs and identity as well. So I think of beliefs as the thoughts that you keep thinking over and over again. So for example, if you have the thought, I'm not good at math, and you say that to yourself over and over, whether you're buying a house or you're contemplating at what age you're going to retire or something that has to do with numbers, and you think, I'm not good at math, that becomes a belief. That is more ingrained in your brain than just a single thought that you had. And I think identity can be one step further than that. The beliefs that you have about yourself that you have held onto for a long time. So long-standing beliefs can become part of your identity. And so if you have a belief, I am an accountant, I am a lawyer, I am a software engineer, that definitely gets into your psyche as part of your identity. I've been spending a lot of time on Substack lately. You can come find me over there. If anybody's on Substack, come find me, Erica Parker Price. But what I did was I typed "who am I" into the search bar because I wanted to see, what do other people say about identity? And what I found was just an endless stream of articles up there with that exact title, "Who am I?" I clicked on several of them. And the most interesting thing I found was that all of these essays that had that same title to them, "Who am I?" You would think that that was going to be answered in the essay. They all had one thing in common, and it was basically that they did not answer the question. They were filled with words like doubt and uncertainty and lost, and basically everybody who's up there writing an essay called "Who Am I?" has no idea who they are. So I thought that was super interesting, that the people that are really examining this question have come to the conclusion that they don't have any idea who they are. I'll give you a couple of examples of things that I read in some of those Substack pieces. So one of them said, I am the girl who sleeps with plantain chips under her pillow to nibble on one at 3 a.m. I thought that was a super interesting one. And it probably does tell you something about her. Another one said, I am a witness. I am an intentional observer who deliberately notices the quiet world. And these were people who were really struggling with that same question. How do I define myself? And specifically, how do I define myself outside of what has been put on me, outside of the societal labels that have been put on me? And so that's where I think we really end up, is if you are in a position where you identify just with your job, what you're finding is that you're lost without that job title. And not just when you're talking to people, it's when you wake up in the morning, it's when you're applying for jobs. So I want to give you a couple ideas that you can work through here to really give you more of a grounding point, more of an anchor. I'm not saying that you're going to come out of this with I'm not saying that you're even going to come out of this with an elevator pitch of what your identity is, but you may just have realized how closely your identity was affiliated with that last job. So I'm going to give you 3 different steps that you can work through as you work to define your new identity. And I don't mean your new identity as in what is the next job you're going to do, but what's your identity going to be right now, before you get that job, after you get that job, and on into the future. The first step is to acknowledge what your identity is not. You are not the opinions that people have of you. You are not your failures, your insecurities, or any of the labels that society has placed upon you, whether those be good labels or bad labels, right? It is possible, I think, to get stuck in even a good label, like a successful leader or something, and now you don't have a job. Are you still a successful leader if you're not currently affiliated with that company where you earned that title? In my mind, yes, of course you are. But to understand that none of those are your identities. Other people have put identities on you, and you don't have to accept them. You can toss them off like an old coat. Okay, step 2 here is to get curious. That's really what I want people to do. I want people to start playing around with this. One of the best ways to do that is to pay attention to your values. If you've never done any values work, and I know many of you probably have because it's kind of been a thing within corporations. I've done some work on values myself. I can tell you my top 5 last time I did them were optimism, purpose, connection, courage, and creativity. What does that mean in terms of an identity? I think they help to define who I am. So when I say get curious, I mean pay attention to who you are outside of the title, outside of the group. Who are you at your essence? And then the third step here is to give yourself permission. Permission to explore, permission to just be yourself. You may want to try on some different identities so that when somebody says, "What do you do? Who are you?" you have some answers that you can come up with. So I'm going to give you a couple here that you can try on. I think human beings in real life, analog, all of that is having its day right now as people are trying to figure out who we are in the age of AI. Quite frankly, I think this identity question is coming up more and more for people unrelated to job searching because AI is taking over some of what some of us thought we were particularly good at and particularly talented at and may have affiliated with. But I'm going to give you a couple starter sentences. So let's try on a couple for size. If you were to start a sentence with, "I'm a human being who," what comes up naturally for you? How do you want to finish that sentence? And a couple ideas would be you could share what you believe in. You could share what you help people do. That's one I use a lot as a coach. And it doesn't have to be human. It could just be, I'm someone who helps people find their full potential, as an example. I'm someone who loves, and then whatever that is. I remember a long time ago seeing an interview with Matthew McConaughey, and I think it was Oprah who was interviewing him, and she asked him that very question, "Who are you?" And quite frankly, I think she used to ask that question of a lot of people. I'll have to go back and see if there's a bunch of famous answers out there. But she asked Matthew McConaughey that question, and he said, "I am a child of God." I found that answer super surprising. That's not necessarily what you would think a Hollywood actor would come up with, but that was the one true, authentic answer for himself. It did not have anything to do with his acting credits, what he had done, what family he came from. I know many people would think his identity is affiliated with Texas or Hollywood or something like that, but it was just very simple. And what I think it really gets down to, regardless of your belief system, is that you are enough exactly as you are. You are not defined by the job that you do, and that does not have to be your identity. Who are you? When I think about it for myself, I definitely associate with some titles and some of what I do. I don't think I'm quite to that point of just saying I am a child of God. I don't think that's the first thought that comes up for me. I thought I'd offer it up for you. But I think of myself from a family perspective. I am a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, a friend. What do I believe in? I believe in living life to its fullest potential. I also help others find their fullest potential. I'm also someone who is building a life, and this is the aspirational side, where I wake up every day and say, I love my life. That's who I want to be. Am I there? Am I right there right now? I think some of that I have. Some of it is a work in progress. And I really think that's what identity is. It is a journey rather than a destination. Who are you can also easily evolve into questions of what is it that you are becoming? Who are you becoming? Because life is definitely a journey, and I don't know that we ever reach that destination. These are all big questions. And like I said, all the essays that I read that had that exact title, "Who am I?" almost all ended up with the idea that they were lost, that they were a work in progress, that they used to know who they were and now they don't anymore. But what I want to tell you is that you are valuable and you are a person of worth without that job title, without the company, whatever it was that you were affiliating yourself with. You are absolutely as worthy today as you ever have been. And none of those accomplishments or achievements are what make you who you are. So That is what I have to say on identity. I'm always curious to know how people take this. Feel free to send me a message. You can always find me at erica@ericaparkerprice.com. Come find me on LinkedIn. I definitely get random connections all the time, and I like to think those are my podcast listeners. I have no idea if you are or not. You're welcome to send me a message when you connect or even after we're connected. That is just fine. I know that what we're talking about today may bend your brain in certain ways, but I hope to do it in a helpful way and that it moves you forward. Have a great week. That's a wrap for this week on Land Your Next Job. If this episode helped, please leave a quick review and subscribe wherever you listen. Share it with a friend in transition, and I'll see you next Monday. Let's land your next job together.